attendees in India. Today, on the auspicious day of Ganesh Chaturthi, we are pleased to announce the launch of the voiceglobal.org portal. Voice stands for the Voice of Indian Causes and Engagement. VoiceGlobal.org is a fusion of the initiatives and hard work of a dedicated team of professionals and academics across the US and India to create a platform that will strive to bring out an understanding from a civilizational context of the past and the present of issues and events that impact India. In a world where we are often swayed by narrow narratives, devoid of context, and swayed by commentaries that have limited understanding of the complexities from where the events emanate, it is indeed befuddling to grasp what is reality, especially in a civilization as old, complex, and vast that is the Indian civilization. It is thus with this goal to have a platform for dispassionate analysis and understanding of the past and the present of the Indian civilization, including its society, technology, literature, arts, economy, global engagements, and its internal drawbacks and challenges that is voice of Indian causes and engagement has been formed. On behalf of the Voice team, I would invite all of you to engage with the issues on the portal voiceglobal.org, that is VoiceGlobal.org. I would also encourage you to contribute with your researched articles on subjects that are relevant for the Voice agenda. On the launch of Voice, we are fortunate to have Sridhar Vajapey, who has spent decades doing research on the people of Indian civilization based on genetic archaeology. His research busts many myths, such as the Aryan invasion theory and how different waves of migration happened into India. His talk brings light to these issues. It brings out one of the foundational contexts of voice: who are the inhabitants of India? Sridhar Vajapey has been a leader in the world of high technology in semiconductors, heading research and development. In his 35 years of work in high end microprocessor technology, he has worked across Texas Instruments, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, and so on. Sridhar has been passionate about history and going beyond the books to research papers and genetic archaeology juxtaposed with global climate change and its impact on civilizations and human migrations. For the past 10 years, he has been doing multi proxy analysis on human migration. I would now invite Sridhar Vajapey to share with us his presentation on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, ancient migrations and modern genetics that will shed light on what the genes tell about the inhabitants of India. Sridhar, over to you.
Thank you, Jayjeet. Greetings, everyone. Jayjeet, thank you for the generous introduction. I would like to also thank Voice Global for inviting me today on the occasion of Ganesh Chaturthi, a very auspicious day for starting their website. Wish the very best success on their launch. What I will look at today is across the Indian population, various castes and tribes, and look at who we are as a people. I'm happy to share what I have learned. It's something that I am very passionate about. I have been reading for a long time. So I have appropriately named my presentation Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which is essentially translating to the world is a family. I will now go through my presentation, a little bit of acknowledgement. A lot of data is there online on International Society of Genetic Geology. Lots of information through Wikipedia, and if you look through at the bottom, you will find references, and I have gone through reading those references as well. The citations are all in the slides wherever applicable. I have added it, so you can always go through those websites. What I would like to do today is basically paint the picture of a timeline. Um, it's essential one should see what are the drivers as well for people to move around. Climate is one of the primary drivers, and I'll go through a little bit. It is key to, in my opinion, it is key to understand what the world's climate was doing for people to move around. And then we will chase the breadcrumbs. A lot of articles have been there in the last 10, 15 years. Research has been done, and it's something that I'd like to share. And essentially, we'll also look at what those genes say, not just chasing the breadcrumbs, but what they actually translate to. So some of this may be new to you. Some of this may be a little over the top, but then you could also go back and read to it. The place I'd like to start with is from the Smithsonian website. I would suggest you go through that as well. If there's more interest, there's also a timeline of the population from the first man, so to speak, a good video. You could look at that as well. So this is an 8 million year chart. And as you can see, the first thing that hits you is that the temperature was very warm and started to come down. And as it started to come down, the fluctuation started to increase. Now, in the large scheme of time, Homo sapiens are just in the corner here on the left side, about 200,000 years or so. Homo erectus and Heidelberg Genesis and all those are our ancestors. Neanderthals, of course, everybody knows about them. But by the time Homo sapiens came about, it is important to understand that people were walking, there were tools, and there was fire. In fact, some research by a very senior archaeologist in India, Ravi Korisetar, he might be on the call as well. He has been through my presentation once already. He's a senior fellow. Now, looking through a lot of his research, one learns that Homo erectus already had started moving into India, migration one, let's call it, about 1.5 million years ago. So ours would be the second migration into the country. Now, there are various dating methods. This is also from Smithsonian website. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but it's there for completeness. You can go and look at it. It's very important to understand how the dating is done. Now let's look at, with that backdrop, let's just look at what the climate and conditions were across time and why it happens. So the factors that actually affect climatic conditions, there are many. Some here that I'd like to go over. The Earth's movements, I feel, are extremely critical. The way the Earth moves, then there are bond events. I will go over some bond events and some cosmic events. Then also there are volcanic eruptions and also earthquakes and so on. Earthquake is a key item, at least for India, because the Saraswati River vanished. Enormous amount of work was done by Dr. V.M.K. Puri, and he also was invited to this call. His work, along with his teammates, was crucial in finding the exact path of the river Saraswati and Drishadwati, its tributary, and what happened to it. Because for Indians as such, that's a very important marker. Okay, let's just look at the Earth's movements. The references, again, as I mentioned, are at the bottom. So there are three things that primarily happen for the Earth's movements. One is the obliquity or the tilt. It tilts quite a bit, actually, 23.5, giving us the seasons, and it also straightens up and tilts again. And this obliquity cycle is around 41,000 years in length. The other one is an eccentricity, where it is near circular motion and then elliptical motion. And this is a 100,000 year cycle. There's another pictorial here. So if you think about it, if you have obliquity happening along with this elliptical orbit. Sometimes summer is here, sometimes summer is here, sometimes summer is in the middle. Okay. Then there is precession. In the precession, what it means is at 23.5 degrees, it spins around. This actually is noted in Atharvana Veda as well and documented in Rig Veda as to where the vernal equinox was at that time. And then over time, the vernal equinox has been changing. That tells you that this was so. Today's pole star was probably not the Dhruva Nakshatram of our time, right? So what does this mean to us in the form of climatic conditions? Milankovitch cycles. So Milankovitch was a person, and he looked at the 100,000 year problem. Essentially, there is a chart here which shows how the temperature was from today on the right side, 450,000 years before present. Okay. And what you will notice is that the temperature actually goes up into extremely hot zone, comes back into extremely cold zone, and it oscillates at roughly 100,000 years. The last one was around 135,000. Before that, it was 85,000, 100,000. So give or take, let's say, about around 100,000 years. How this is done, Epica Dome C temperature measurement estimates were taken. There's more information in the article below. For the last cycle, where we are today, so to speak, this never reached the top. There's a reason why it didn't reach the top. Let's just say today we are having a Goldilocks temperature. And we're enjoying it today. Let's take this cycle, expand it, and overlay it on warm 4. These are warm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I didn't name it, somebody named it. If you overlay that, what you will see is that the temperature started rising. It probably would have gone up and then come back down. However, some incident happened, an event, around 13,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, a massive event, and you will notice these are in thousands of years. It was a big expanse of time. This period of time is called the Younger Dryas. Dryas is a dry period. Why do we say that? When the temperature is very low, the air cannot pick up moisture in the sea, therefore there are no rains. In the Indian context, in the Hindu context, it is described as pralayam. And, we've written it in our age-old books, but is this what pralayam is all about? I'll let you ponder over that one. Okay. So the pralayam happens, and then the temperature starts to rise. There is a setback, and then it comes back up. And then the movement of the earth causes it to plateau, and then it turns. There are various other events, as you can see, that happens. We are here today. The question is whether the temperature is going to go down. Who knows? This is called the 8,200 year event. I'm just merely going to point to it. I'm not going to go too much into that detail. There's another 4,200 year event here as well. These are the bond events that I referred to. So I will go over the bond events in the Younger Dryas event. Bond events are essentially ice drift from the massive sheets of ice that just drop into the ocean, changing the ocean's temperature. And when that happens, it has a global effect. You can imagine it depends on how much ice falls into it. And there were many events, and Bond Zero was in the 1800s to 1400s, 1500s, which was basically called the mini ice age. Much has been written about it. And then there is another Bond event, 1177 year BC year civilization collapsed. I suggest you look at that video. I have seen it twice. I love that video. The actual year it happened was probably 1186 BC, but the movie was called 1177. And then there is another Bond event, which was deemed as the Aryan migration in so-called Aryan migration, and we will talk about this in detail. And the previous one, Sahara, got to its level where it is, and this is the 8,200 year event. I will go over some of these as we go through. Let's first talk of the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas was a period which was a very long period. As the Earth came out of Pralayam, out of a massive glacial age, and the last glacial maximum happened, LGM, and the temperature started to rise, something happened. The potential causes of the Younger Dryas are manifold. Three of the works stand out. One is the shutdown of the North Atlantic conveyor, the one that takes the warm water from the equator up. The other one is a meteor strike. Third one is an eruption. The possibility that the meteor strike was it is very high, and there are many papers on it. If you look at it, the time frame, 12,000 years, when the Great Lakes were formed, a lot of the lakes in the United States were formed, and in UK as well. And the splatter is all outwards, so to speak, which would mean that something did happen, right? So that could be, and there are nano diamonds that are formed due to extreme heat that have been found as well. So coming out of the low period, low temperature period, before the Younger Dryas, and as the Younger Dryas was progressing, the sea levels were 350 feet lower, 120 meters. And as the sea level started to rise to today's level, the temperature was warming up. That was the driver. However, what's more important to know is that when the sea level was lower, India, like most other continents, if not all of them, were much bigger. There was probably not even a sea. Box Straits probably didn't exist. So you must look at it from that context here, right? So let's look at the 4,200-year event that I had mentioned earlier. It's defined as a phase of intense aridity, which lasted for quite a bit, 200-something years, right? And is recorded across a lot of continents. One of the things that has been noted is that the glaciers actually moved down, meaning the sheets grew, corroborating the evidence that the world was a much colder place at that time. The onset of a lot of things happened, and I will go through that in the next slide, but it's coinciding with the Bond 3 event, right? So exactly what do people think? And the references are here. There are many references. How did the world look like, right? There were regions where there was no rain, extreme dryness. And then there were regions where there was plenty of rain. India happened to be one of them. A lot of rain. Middle East, Caspian Sea, Black Sea, a lot of the northern side of Himalayas, and all of Africa. So what happened on that small period of time, right? Let's look at the entire world. This is the known world at that time. Indus Valley collapsed, like I mentioned earlier. We also had the Saraswati River, which was draining down smaller and smaller. Before was one of the drivers for Indus Valley. Then there is the collapse in China. The Akkadian Empire finished. So did the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, old kingdom collapsed, and Spain. I thought this was interesting. I recently read this article. I suggest you read it too. How they started building their homes and water catchment and so on and so forth. So this is a backdrop, right? So the people here were under extreme pressure. They had to move. They were probably dying in thousands. And why do I say that, right? Let us look at the temperature just over the last 4,000 years. 4,000 years, that's when this happened. Okay. So you had the extreme cold. You had warm periods, and then cold periods, warm, extreme cold. It's also called the European Dark Age, by the way, top and bottom. So Indus Valley declined, Harappan civilization vanished. Then you had the Minoan War, where a lot of civilization flourished. Ourselves in India, we saw the Mahajanapadas and the population across the Ganges, as we know from our books, and the Buddhist texts as well. And then again, the temperature started dropping. Ramesses III This is when the civilization collapsed. I referred to that you could read through, and then the temperature started going up again, right? But a lot of catastrophes happened at the bottom. Finally, in this phase, the Han Dynasty finished up. Rome started falling, and entire Europe went into the Dark Age. To give you a sample of what exactly could happen when the temperature drops just 2 degrees, right? In 784 AD, one-third of Europe died of starvation. Not small numbers. 1.5 million in France in the mini ice age. Then Estonia, 50%. Finland, one-third gone. Deccan famine, Bengal famine, which was partially man-made. China, 45 million. There are 11 millions in India. So the numbers, the proportions are ginormous, so to speak, the effect of a drop of temperature. Now I want to overlay this 2-degree drop on top of a 6-degree drop that I had shown during the phase of the glacial maximum during Pralayam. So as you can imagine, it would have been catastrophic, right? So this is the backdrop on which what we are going to say in the left side of the screen, what happened, and I will come to that. So that's the backdrop for the temperature variations that are a key driver, in my humble opinion, for people to move around. Okay, so let's look at some genetic tracing. This is from the website of University of Texas. It's an article from it's not on their website, it's an article by University of Texas. So what we are going to say is that the new Homo sapiens, Homo erectus was already in India, as I had mentioned earlier. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and started to move out. There were 2 migrations out. One, the northerly route, as it's called, into the Middle East. The first migration was unsuccessful. Somewhere I read that in Mount Carmel and other places, there are fossils found. They didn't make it very far. The second migration was a southerly route into India, and this was a very successful route into Australia, around into Mongolia. That was, we will call them Group C. And then there was Group D, the brother, which essentially came down to Andaman Islands, the Japanese, the Tibetans, and so on. There were 2 migrations for women, which we will cover first, and those were deemed as mutation M and mutation N. Now we cover them. So this is generally what it looks like, the walk paths that were taken. This is a very simplified drawing. The website is put up right there. Okay. Coming out, there's the southerly route, the first movement, which is M, into India, and then out into rest of Asia and in the east, and then the same child, another child, going out, taking a northerly route supposedly, and again into India, and you can basically say it's 50% of each today that's in India. Let's look at M. So there were 2 migrations out of Africa. One is M and one is N for the ladies, which I'm covering first, ladies first. So it was around 65, 70,000 years or earlier. That is the N, and the M was earlier than that. And essentially, large number of mutations happened. And these people are strewn around in India in different places, which I will show where they are located. And Andaman Islands have just 2 of these variations. What is another thing that I have found is and read is that the lineages seem to belong, the Central Asian ones belong to an Eastern Eurasian clan, and there was no large-scale migration of M-class people into India. Okay. The other one was the N, which I mentioned, around 65,000 years. The M took the southerly route, N the northerly route, as was stated earlier, and N gene mutated multiple times, so to speak, and a lot of the R and U and others are located in India. The question is, where are they today? Can you walk around and point to them, right? And there's some analysis done. I took it out of Wikipedia, and then there are links underneath that. If you just go to Wikipedia and put that website, go down into the references. I pulled it out of the references. So the M6 land, for example, there's a high population in Kashmir area and along the eastern seaboard. M2, pretty much across, pasted across, M3, and so on, right? And there are analysis on every type of mutation there. My mother herself was M49D. I was looking research on that. And in Nandyal, Kurnool, and all those areas, there's a large population of M49D. Lo and behold, she happens to be one. My wife happens to be M53, and that happens to be in northern Uttaranchal, and there is a hotspot there. So there are maps. Here is the R, derivative daughter of N, so to speak, pasted across, peanut buttered across, and then there is the U7. You can see either if they mutated in India, then they went out, or the other way around, depending where the mutation happened. And another one, I like this one. It's just all over the place, U2, right? And then I've got some notes on where some of the others can be found as well. M17, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, all of those. Did they walk out of the Yunnan Pass? That's another question. And Kazakhstan, so on and so forth. Right? So much for the female side, the DNA tracing where they're located and located today and their walk paths into the country. Now let's look at the Y DNA, which basically is the paternal side or the male side DNA. It happens to be a lot more colorful from the number of mutations that have happened. This was a simplistic chart image. I just added it before this presentation, which is a very broad brush type. I know we have heard in India Dravidians. I'm from Chennai, so I got to be Dravidian. How about that? Okay, and people in the north were all Aryans. It's like, oh my God. You know, as I went through time, that belief was completely shattered. There's no such thing. Okay, and let's actually look at each one of this. So this is a very simplified view of what the ISOGG has on their website, what they track, what they maintain. My apologies to them already in advance. So if you say there was Adam, B, C, D, E, F, and they had children, and then so and so and so and so. Now a little broad brush. C was the first one to out into India and out kept walking as the hunter-gatherers kept expanding. D was the second one out, right? And then there was F. I should have actually colored these two also yellow because they did play a large part in India, and you will see that later on the charts. And you had H. Now H is unique in sense that in the world it's actually called the Indian marker, even though there may have been others that were mutated in India, like L and so on and so forth. P is another one which gave rise to two. One is the American Indians. This entire Q tribe, the Chukchi people in northeast Russia, which is the Siberian side, and the walk path into Alaska through Bering Straits and all over America, right? R is a large part of India, so to speak, right? These are not the Aryans. These are not generally debated as the Aryans. Now, then you have two people come out of it, R1 and R2 mutations. R2 mutation is pretty much in India today with a few sprinkles around as far as the density is concerned. Then R1 was split into R1A and R1B, and these are the people that are called so-called Aryans. I happen to test my father-in-law's genes, and he happens to be an R2 gene. All along, I thought he was an R1A gene, but it turns out he's an R2 gene. Then looking through 23andMe at his relatives, a whole lot of Marathi people showed up. He was Maharashtrian, showed up as his relatives. So no surprise about the proximity and the language and so on and so forth showed up. Now the question really where are these people today? Okay. And what might they have done in the past, right? Let's just look at a few of these because we are pressed for time. So H gene. There's no debate. A lot of authors, they all claim South Asia, by the way, is another name for India. That basically includes Pakistan, Bangladesh, and others. But there's no debate anywhere where they originated from. J2, if you look at the spectrum across the Middle East and the Arabs, you'll find that there's a high peak of J2 over there. Okay, and then the L gene. Think of Indus Valley when I say L gene. Okay, so there are a number of authors who actually say that they are from India or just on the other side of Hindu Kush. Very close in those time frames, right? And then I'm not talking about R, I'm talking about R1A and R2. R1A, which is the Aryan gene, so-called Aryan gene. South Asia is actually, again, like I said, consider that as India. So the number of articles are varied, but different authors have different viewpoints and how they approach the problem, so to speak, and they have claimed differently. But all of them basically conclude one thing, that it is somewhere in the northwest region, either on the other side of Hindu Kush, north side of Hindu Kush, or the south. Okay. And then the R2 gene, pretty much, it's very close to India or in India. Okay. This is the same thing. All the different genes we've got, C through T. For sake of time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but some of them are marked, shaded differently, and I'm going to talk about them. Now, one of the things to realize is not every people of every mutation went about with 6 children and 10 children, right? However, there were certain specific gene type people where in a particular point in time suddenly exploded in population. I don't know about everybody on this call, but one thing for sure, if I just look at my parents and their parents, we went through a phase where each one had 6 children or more, right? I'm last of 6. So let's look at the South Asian or the Indian portion. There are the others also listed for completeness. There is the American Indians and the Africans and the Orientals. O2 is basically a lot of the Han people. O3 becomes Thailand, Cambodia at the bottom, and R1B are the whites. Now let's spend time on the Indian side of it, right? H1 gene, the Indian marker gene, look at the time frame when it exploded. By the way, just because there's an explosion here doesn't mean that that was the only time that they had children. These are some markers they have found. Then the R1A, I happen to be an R1A. Our entire family happens to be R1A. And we will see where they are located. So they had multiple points of explosion. This is one of those that I say in our scriptures, Bahuputra Labham, they keep saying, right? We keep repeating that in various shlokas, and there it is. And then the L1 gene people who happen to be, there are different articles. Here is one in this article, punctuated bus, around 4,500 BC or so, massive explosion in time. Okay? Keep this in mind when you see what was constructed in India. I'm going to go through the H gene first. So this is the gypsy migrations regime. During the Chandragupta Vikramaditya time, there was enormous push by Chandragupta, and Kshemendra has written in the biography, if you look at it, where Chandragupta claims, I have unburdened the sacred earth, which is India, of the Mlechas, the Hunas, the Shakas, and there's a list, right? Now, that was between 450 AD and thereabouts, let's just say. So, I believe, caught in the crossfire, a lot of these people as well left, right? The gene itself is 30 to 40,000 years old, but the migrations were very recent out of the country. If they hadn't migrated out, I suppose they'd all be sitting in India. Where are they today? About 60% of these are pretty much located in Indian subcontinent, South Asia, I'd say, right? And these are what I thought earlier as Dravidians. I work closely with an engineer, Maheshwari, and I've figured out that he's from Rajasthan. He's also H gene. And a lot of these are northern tribes, Chenchu in Andhra, then South India, Malaysian Indians. Of course, we know they had migrated a long time ago. Sinhalese, Northwest India. So pretty much strewn all over the country. Okay, the H gene, popularly earlier claimed as the Dravidian gene. And then you have the migrants who went out strewn around the world as well. Let's look at the L and T haplogroup. Earlier, I had mentioned L and T were together mutations from K. T actually is sitting in the Horn of Africa, and then L people, let's just say over there, right? It's basically the Indus Delta and so on and so forth. South Asia, West Asia, and so on, right? A lot of Baluchis. Indus Valley civilization also has a similar profile, so to speak. LM20 gene mutation people, and here in this article, it was stated article by that's noted about 7,000 years they started expanding. Also suggests that it's a suggestion that it spread in the valley, may be associated with expansion of farming during Neolithic. Let's just look at Indus Valley, right? 1.2 million square kilometers. Mesopotamia. I bet most people know more about Mesopotamia and Egypt than Indus Valley. But the net of it is Indus Valley was 10 times the size of Mesopotamia and Egypt combined, right? That's the size of things that these guys built. Large, right? So one of the recent papers, just last week, I was reading an analysis on Jats, and in that analysis, with the sample size that they looked from Haryana Jats, 34% of them were this L gene. Okay, are they really Aryans or Dravidians? I don't know. They would definitely not be Aryans, but would fall under the H and L and all those, right? 34%. Now look at the R gene. This is the most controversial one, but this is the R gene. There are multiple hypotheses, like all the others that I spoke about. There are multiple hypotheses in this as well. The Kurgan hypothesis, the one I like, the one that's more popular because of the time frame, that fits at a certain time frame. Armenian hypothesis, it's been said that it's too late a date. Anatolian hypothesis, Colin Renfrew has actually got a wonderful YouTube video. Again, that's one of those, I think I saw it 3 times. You can look at that too. Okay, 7,500 BC, that's his. And then there are many more, right? Every researcher probably comes up with a slight variation. We'll go with the Kurgan hypothesis for today. The R gene, we saw earlier a map of H and L and where they were from. I had not covered R in that table. The R gene actually is slated to or thought to be in three locations. One is Northwest India, so to speak, and I have shown that map here, pulled out of a website. Then the other one is the one and only skeleton found, the Malta boy in Siberia. That's not a very old skeleton, and that happens to be an R gene. Okay, so Siberia is a spot. The Chukchi people, the Q people in Kazakhstan, that's where, if you followed Wells's Journey of Man, he will point to Kazakhstan and say that's where the American Indians started, and they could be from the same parent, different parent, but anyway, it's from the same gene type, a descendant of the same gene type. And the third one states somewhere outside the Hindu Kush, let's say Central Asia. Okay, somewhere Central Asia. Doesn't matter to our story, but the story that's important to us is, as a derivative of R, you have two mutations. R2, stated earlier, pretty much thought to be from South Asia or nearabouts there. And then the other child, so to speak, R1, which in this map is shown to be right there, right? Moved out to the west, Fertile Crescent between Black Sea and Caspian Sea. And then there are two offsprings, R1A and R1B, two mutations, right? R1B, nobody knows who moved first. These are also called Yamnaya people. They're pit grave people. They used to dig up and bury their people. And a lot of graves have been found, by the way, and checked out. So let's assume R1, for this conversation, R1B moved, and they moved down here. They moved westward as well. Okay, and Tutankhamun, supposedly, I was looking at what change of genes in Egypt, and Tutankhamun gene I read somewhere is a R1B, so he arrived there. And then the R1A people, which is closer to a large part of the Indian population, let's just say 25%, okay, started somewhere in above the Black Sea, if you trust where the oldest one is found, M17, and then a mutation, M417, and then they moved over to the Scandinavian lands and Northern Europe, and then went down to Andronova expansion, as it's called, Russia, the Tarim Basin, spun around the Caspian Sea into Iran area, which is called the Z94 people, then L657 into India as well. Here is the oldest R1A. This is the mutation R1A1, A417, and then the Z93, and then you see there's an eastward spillover, then you can see. Now, look at the shape of where the R1A people are located today, shown better in this slide. It's like a dumbbell. A population here, a population there. And this is R1B people scrunched into a corner, right? So the whites that you would generally see running around, that we call, so to speak, R1A, R1B people, if they are essentially our cousins from India as well, right? And then you have the R2 I mentioned earlier. And if you look at the caste, this is the tribes, the one in the smaller inset, and the one in the larger slide is the upper caste and the scheduled castes and tribes, right? They're strewn all across the place, including the tribes on top and in Karnataka and Kerala area as well, okay? All this analysis is available online. If you have the patience to read the papers, you will be able to come to the same, you will see the same drawing actually. Okay, so what do these genes say? Here's what I have covered up till now, right? C, D came out. There were mutations inside India. F, we don't know where F is. Then H inside India. L, probably in India. R, probably in India. R1, A and B. Then you've got R2 and so on. So let's see what they say, okay? Who we are as a people. So the Y haplogroup distribution in India. Okay. If you look at the demographics, it's a total 728 people polled. And recall all of these that I was talking about? There you go, right? C through R2, all thrown across, and a sub. So you take that, I plotted a pie chart. I don't know if it's the right thing to do to plot a pie chart, but I did it anyway, okay? And what you're going to see is that if you say combine, take all the H people and roll them together, right? They're about 25%. 25%. Okay. Then you have the J tribes, let's just say it's Middle Eastern location. Then you have L's. I gave the example of Jats. There were also others, and I will point to it later in my slide as well. Then you have the O type, right, which seems like a large amount to me. I was surprised. I didn't know if this was really correct, but there's a large amount, but I cannot dispute data. And then you have the so-called Aryans, right? That's actually 16%. And then you have the R1B. This is all that you see of the Brits left in the country, I suppose. And then you have the R2 gene. So if you say all R's put together, that's about 25%, right? And then, of course, the first migrants out of Africa, you find a small amount of those. Not much expansion has seemingly happened out of them. Of course, the entire Mongolian people, Genghis Khan and all of them were C tribe people, a large population of C. Then you have F as well, by the way, the great granddaddy of a lot of these mutations here, right? So the demographics of H, the Koraga tribals, the Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Chamars, the Bengalis, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Dravidians. Okay, strewn around. Different papers, different nomenclature used, but there you have it. Okay. So it is strewn, they're strewn across India. Of course, you saw the map also. Let's look at the R1A gene, right? R1A gene, 115 people out of the 728 turned out to be R1A, and they are strewn across a lot of the Brahmins. And this was interesting, I thought. The Saharia tribe, 50%. So a lot of Brahmins, upper caste, Konkanast. My father-in-law was Konkanast, but he turned out to be an R2 Konkanast. So what does that all that mean, right? So by the way, this is a belt. I somewhere I saw it was a belt, 72% in West Bengal, streaming over to Kashmir area as 40%. It's a belt of people, and it will coincide with what was then supposedly the Aryan settlement, right? Let's move on. Where are they located? Okay. Another view on the male side. The ladies' side we saw earlier. H gene kind of strewn around. There's a large population here in the south. These are the tribes. This is the upper caste, so to speak, as has been cut. And then the R1A people, we saw a map earlier strewn around. And the J2 people, you can expect the spillover from Middle East into here, right? Again, the tribes, there is a large part of Kerala, Karnataka, and Maharashtra at the bottom. And then the L gene people who we kind of accuse them of being one of the leaders in the Indus Valley creation. And again, the tribals as well, right? So now let's look at this analysis. There are a lot of papers here, by the way, where I have gotten all this information. You know, it's all on the right side. You see my little laser pointer. Okay, and let's see who's got the monopoly on a particular gene. Oh, wait, I don't see one. So C, D is not shown, the Andaman East side, E, F, G, H. Essentially, pretty much strewn across. Everybody gets a check mark, right? Um, there's no one. I was being from Chennai. I said, let me look at Ayers and Iyengars, right? And what I found was interesting. They have both C's, they have both G's, they have both of these in H, they have both of these with these. They have one of everything, identical, so to speak. Like that, it was just very interesting for me when I went over every one of these. I just marked up H, L, and R because I have spent more time on H, L, and R today. Okay. So more of the same castes listed. The Brui people, they are actually in Pakistan. They also get the similar check marks right across. And by the way, there are articles written on the Baluchi Brui people being Dravidians who moved over to Pakistan. They're closer in linguistic, from linguistic perspective to people in the south, so to speak. They all turned out to have the same gene at the end of the day. In this total year, 2,504 people, and how they turned out. Okay. This is a different cut of the same data, H tribals, so to speak. I sorted it. This is an Excel table. I sorted it by age. And some of you may recognize some of these names. I do because I've been reading about them, right? It's the Indian marker, also earlier thought to be Dravidian gene. It's actually Dravidians come way down south. Actually, South Indian Tamils here, 31%, right? It turns out that from the tribal perspective, they also have some mixture. I think of India as this way, in a very simplistic manner. All the genes put in a big bag, shaken up, and then spread out into the different places. Okay, you get different ratios of the same thing. By the way, the language here, the way it is written, DR is Dravidian language, Indo-European language, what they speak, Austro-Asiatic language. So between them, you will find all of them listed. Now, the one thing that I do have to say is that the Munda tribes, Northeast, they are predominantly O, but they're not really just that. They have 25% of them are H as well. Okay. Another sort. This is based on R1A, since it's popular to talk about the R1A people. West Bengal Brahmins, but the sample size was 18. Mind you, they went and sampled a whole lot of people from all over the place, and 18 turned out to be from there. Right? The authors are all listed here, and you can Google those and go read up on those articles. Again, languages are written here. Dravidian languages, let's start. Tamil is one, for example. Indo-European language, any Sanskrit derivative is counted as one to be on the other side. Again, there's a large mixture of these. I sorted them. Pretty much everybody falls in that category. Now, the R2 gene that I mentioned actually turns out to be interesting too, in the sense that West Bengal Brahmins, and then there was one here. Here you go. Punjabi Brahmins, a very significant portion of them turned out to be that gene type. Same thing, New Delhi specific, the Hindus over there, and 34% R1A gene and H gene. So pretty much my conclusion at the end of this is that nobody has any monopoly of anything. We're all a complete, total mixture right across, right? Let's do some takeaways here. So modern humans, 200,000 years ago, give or take, okay? As time goes on, if we find new evidence, that number will be changed, of course, right? The early migrants, one of their path was into India, coming out of Africa. So something I had stated. So from my little reading, and watching YouTube videos and all that, India seems to me, at least, to have the most diverse set of genes there are anywhere in any country or region. All castes and tribes have a mixture of numerous gene types. This is what genetics call admixture. You know, one of the interesting YouTube videos I saw of one Dr. Moorjani from Berkeley. I sent her an email inviting her to this presentation, and she actually responded with her paper yesterday, so I couldn't include that piece. One note that I found was very interesting. What she said was that in earlier days, there was enormous amount of this admixture happening. People didn't actually stay within their tribes or sects for marriages and so on. So there was enormous mixture. And as time went on, when there were founders for a certain caste or whatever class of people, right? Later in time, that admixture did not happen. In fact, she showed in my next presentation, I can probably include it. She showed a chart, of bar graph chart, and one of the things I saw Vaishyas on top with very small mixture, staying within the community, and then you had the Gujars at the bottom, who were very large. They just mixed every tribe, I suppose, every different class of gene, probably. So it's a variation, but it's an admixture nevertheless, right? So I concluded it by saying that, hey, we're all the same family. So I called my presentation Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, right? We are one family. I hope you liked the presentation. If there are any questions, I'm happy to field them. So JG, back to you.
Thank you, Sridhar. I think this was absolutely fascinating. It was an absolutely fascinating journey of humanity that you took us through. It is unbelievable how civilizations rose and fell more because of the whims and fancies of Mother Nature, and we had despots and autocrats thinking they drove the future of humanity. And Mother Nature itself, as you rightly mentioned, and as we learned from your presentation, was driven by the movement of the planet as it raced around the sun. And that's absolutely fascinating and amazing. Even more fascinating is how these tumultuous changes determined how humans evolved, migrated, and mixed to create a species that has become the most dominant single species ever in the entire history of the planet. It's absolutely amazing journey, Sridhar, that you took us through. So extremely grateful to you and thank you so much. There are a large number of questions that came up, and I do realize we've got very little time, but I'll go through a few of them. The first question that came up was the size of the Indus Valley civilization is an eye opener, and that the fact that they were 10 times larger than the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations combined is an absolute eye opener. The question is, where did the inhabitants of the Indus Valley civilization, or the Saraswati civilization that it is now called, where did they come from?
So if you believe in that paper I referred to and spent some time, which says that a large portion of them, if you saw the gene mutation and the size, the H gene people and the L gene people with mutation M20 were located in those parts, and you could say they were actually the creators of the Indus Valley. Now, H gene we know is an Indian gene. Nobody ever debates that, right? The other one, of course, is the L. And as you saw from my table, it's various authors actually say, it's from India, again, just like H, or somewhere near in Central Asia or other side of Hindu Kush, let me just put it that way, but in that general vague region, right? So where did they come from? They actually mutated probably right there and stayed right there and built the whole place over time. Again, as pointed out, an eye opener for me on that paper I mentioned by Dr. Murjani. In earlier times, I don't think they were looking at a certain sect of people to marry within them, right? I mean, so there must have been a big admixture there, and they probably constructed the Indus Valley.
Great, very, very interesting. So, Sridhar, the other question that has come is from what you presented. It seems that ethnic groups in India do seem to have similar genetic markers as per the Y haplogroup distribution that you showed. So, are groups or ethnic groups in India genetically different? Is there a genetic mechanism by which you can separate the ethnic groups, or there is no such thing?
Um, Not you saw the tables as well. These are not my tables; they're all online. References are given. If you believe the tables, there is nobody has any monopoly on anything, right? We have over time, in my opinion, uh, gone off with some beliefs, a set of people, and it's basically that. And depending on the location and who formed the majority of them, or a significant portion, they adopted a certain language as well, right? That's where you obviously have the linguistic spray right across the country, right? As they say, you keep moving, and then you have a different dialect, and then you go far enough, and it's different enough. Now you call it a different language, right? That's how it is. So to me, I can't see too much difference other than the proportions are different, right?
So, what it seems that, and that's a remark that has come in, that there seems to be no special genetic marker for Dravidians, Tibetans, Bengalis, Uttaranchalis, Nepalis. So, is that a true takeaway from your presentation?
To me, what my earlier beliefs are, where and what I see from what if you let's start with the belief that H and L were, and even extend that to R2, and even perhaps R, were all born there, right? Now, who is the Dravidian here, right? The only one who sticks out is the R1A people, who are 16-17% of the population. The rest are significant other portions, right? So to me, yes, there is a broad brush claim of Dravidians, but the question is, we have Marwadis, who are a huge population of H's. Then you have the Lombardis and so on. It's a proportion business, by the way. Let's get that clear, right? So it's hard to classify, in my opinion.
Right, Sridhar. The next question, Sridhar, that I see that has come up is on the theory that keeps popping up is the Aryan invasion theory. And the question is that if 16% of the population has got R1A genes, then are these the Aryans, and is that the entity which invaded India, and that was the Aryan invasion theory?
It does get murky once you have all the data in front of you as to who came, right? Um, at the end of the day, we do know just by the age of the different genes found, right? Z93 came before Z94 came, then you have the other few, M342.2, L657, which is the son of that. So anyway, if you go on tracing all of those, I didn't put that entire tree, maybe I should have, and where the older ones are and the younger ones are. You can say that the L657 people did come in 4,200 years ago. For enormous period of time, hundreds of years, there was hardly any food and so on and so forth. And you can imagine, if large part of these people were indeed hunter-gatherers, the animals either died of starvation and thirst, or they moved, and it's likely that people just moved. If you watch that Chukchi YouTube video, it's a documentary, I think, made by National Geographic. The Chukchi people today, right? They are hunter-gatherers, and they follow the reindeer tribe. They pack up and they move, right? So if you say that that's how it was, then they just followed the animals or whatever, right? Now you can say that 8,200 years ago agriculture might have started, but I just read the National Foundation's paper that it could be older than that, where rice cultivation came into the country. I immediately shot off an email saying, "Can I have the full paper, please?" I haven't heard back. That's the U.S. government, of course. So the net is some people did come in. My opinion is there was no invasion of any sort. These are poor, hungry people. You saw the map from the paper that I pulled. The India were wetlands and everything else was dry lands, and naturally people go to the wetlands looking for food. And the population overall was very low. Indus Valley was being vacated anyway for other reasons, as Dr. Puri had shown. The Saraswati River basically moving away into Yamuna and Sutlej. So people were vacating, and it is the right time. You had a new river Sutlej coming with a lot of water. People might have come and settled down there first, which I think is a known fact, and then moved down the Gangetic Plain. There are some other papers that I've been reading. Birbal Sahini Institute. People have done a lot of work where they have dug in various ancient sites down to 25,000 years. I tried to exchange emails with them. I just got an email last night from Dr. Anjali Trivedi as well. I'm hoping to have a conversation, ask for an appointment. So if you look at that total depth that they have dug through and analyzed the sediments, the Ganges plain might not have been habitable that long time ago. And over time, it became habitable for various reasons. They look at pollen, grains in soil, they look at the type of soil, they look at the fauna that they can find, and you find that later in time, right? So there was a natural spread at that time happen into the Gangetic plain, right? So did people come in? Yeah. Was that an invasion? Probably not. Yeah, I don't think so at all. There is no paper written by any serious person who would ever claim that. And you must look at the backdrop again. 200 years, no water, no food. What are they going to do? Can't expect them to perish, right? They were, after all, descendants of the same R, and their R2 cousins are sitting here, right?
Thanks,
So
thank you for busting that myth, Sridhar. That indeed is a myth that keeps going around. There's another question that comes in is that are there parallel studies to show similar patterns in the maternal genes? The maternal genes have traditionally been used to trace ancestral history. So does that um, support the claims that have been made by you?
So the maternal genes, there were two migrations out of Africa, right? And if you look at the M gene, a lot of the mutations happened right there in India for the M gene, and same with the N gene. And then you find another. If you believe the northerly route was taken, then a sect came in, and the rest went off. Right? Went to Europe, went to Central Asia and other places. Right? I particularly don't have too much more detail on M and N genes, so to speak, other than where they are located today. And perhaps over time there will be more papers on those as well that we can actually get. But one thing is clear: we know exactly where they are situated. Unlike the male genes, which are sprinkled across, the M genes seem to have a lot more concentration, but they are also sprinkled across. I don't have a table like I showed for the different genes and the different types of people. I suspect when I put the same types of people and pull data and try to populate it, if that work has been done, then you'll probably see a similar set, except you won't see C, D, E, and so on and so forth. You're going to see M1, M49D, M25, M5, A3, and so on and so forth, right? That's how you're going to see the spread. but there's not much debate because it's the same one M family, and there's no new ones coming into the country, as an example. And various papers tell you get between 40-60 relationship between M and N's derivative, N and N derivatives across the country. Pretty evenly spread, I'd say, for this conversation.
Great. Sridhar, one more question that is there is, do you find any discrepancies between your findings and what Yuval Noah Harari has written in his very popular books?
Ah. I actually don't know much about that book. I've only heard. I will definitely go and research into it more. It's just one of those things I haven't done. I tend to gravitate towards books written by, or papers, I should say, written by like archaeologists like Ravi Korisetar, who a premier person who's here. I find various universities across India who have fantastic papers. I keep looking at papers and PhD theses and that sort, but I will look at that too.
Sure.
So,
Thank you. Sridhar, you can imagine that there are so many questions coming in from the attendees. There are many, many specific questions. For example, one of the questions is, what are details of inhabitants of Uttarakhand region? Where do they come from? But we have completely run out of time. If you want to make any general last remark, or if you want to answer the last question that I asked, up to you, Sridhar, before we close this discussion today.
um, yeah, so for me, one of those things that I feel we should do more of is a multi-proxy analysis based on, in this presentation specifically, I've done two things, right? Climate, and then I've looked at the genes and where they are situated today and the ancestry of the genes. But there are other things that can be done. And that's something I am doing, which is bring in the archaeological aspect of it as well into this conversation. And then working with Pandit Venkatesh Bhatt formerly from Sringeri Mutt, are there Vedic aspects that can be brought into this conversation as well? So what you will find at some point in time, you're going to reach that conclusion where a lot of these things are similar, and then you start to adjust the timelines and then put a storyline together. Right.
Great.
Anyway, that's a lot of work ahead. But thank you very much for the invite today. Really appreciate it that you guys thought of me, and
It's
happy to
absolutely a
share.
pleasure. From on behalf of Voice Global and the team, we would really like to thank you for this absolutely fascinating journey. I don't think most of us were ever exposed to this thought process, and the fact that we had such a rich mix of people, and that's what constitutes India and the inhabitants of India. I think it was an absolute eye opener. So thank you so much, Sridhar. And with that, we actually launched voiceglobal.org. And if anybody has any further questions, please feel free to write to the editor, and we'll attempt to answer those questions. And if you have any articles to submit which are well researched, please reach out to the editor. And you can see in the ticker tape below there is the email ID of the editor. Thank you, and a very good night to all of you, or have a very good day for those who are in US and Europe. Thank you.
Thank you.